I was standing on my penthouse rooftop at 7 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, watching a building inspector, a fire marshal, our HOA president, and their lawyer walk toward me with clipboards and cameras ready to shut down the feast I had spent 72 hours preparing for 150 people who had nowhere else to go. Behind them, my own family had just pulled up in two separate cars, their faces pale with fury and shame because the local news had already picked up the story. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother that read, just 4 words. "What do you want?" I smiled, took a breath of the freezing Chicago air, and thought about how I had gotten here to this moment where I was about to either lose everything or prove that I had finally learned how to set a table big enough for the people who actually mattered. But before I tell you how this all unfolded, if you are enjoying this story of standing up for yourself and rewriting the rules, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below, telling me about a time when you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity. Your support means everything, and it helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. Now let me take you back to where this really began. 3 days earlier, I had been standing in almost the exact same spot, looking out over the Chicago skyline as the sun set on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. The city was already winding down offices, emptying early families heading to airports and train stations. My phone buzzed and I glanced down, expecting a work email. Instead, it was a text from my father. Short and efficient, the way Richard Vance handled everything that made him uncomfortable. The message read, "Thanksgiving dinner is at capacity this year. Perhaps next year we can make it work." I read it 3 times, and each time the words felt less real and more like something out of a bad sitcom. Capacity. As if their dining room were a restaurant with a fire code limit. As if I were a walk-in customer being turned away at the door. I stood there for a long moment, the phone growing cold in my hand, and I realized that I was not surprised. Not even a little bit. I was 33 years old, and I had spent most of those years learning that my place at the Vance family table was always conditional, always subject to last-minute cancellation, always less important than appearances and the comfort of everyone else. My name used to be Aurora Lawson before I legally changed it to Alyssa Thorne 5 years ago. I had taken my maternal grandmother's maiden name because I wanted a fresh start, a name that did not carry the weight of disappointment and failed expectations. The Vances, my parents Richard and Eleanor, along with my older sister Serafina and my younger brother Leo, had not taken it well. To them, it was a betrayal, a public rejection of the family legacy. To me, it was survival. I had built Skyline Logistics from the ground up, a tech-driven shipping company that now employed over 200 people and had contracts with some of the biggest retailers in the Midwest. I had worked 80-hour weeks, slept in my office, skipped meals, and poured every ounce of my energy into proving that I was not the family failure they had always implied I was. But none of that had ever been enough to earn a permanent seat at their table. Serafina, the golden child, was a high-powered attorney at a prestigious firm downtown, the kind of daughter who made Richard and Eleanor beam with pride at country club dinners. Leo was the diplomatic one, the peacemaker always smoothing things over and making excuses for everyone else's bad behavior. I had stopped expecting invitations a long time ago, but every year there was a tiny stubborn part of me that hoped this time would be different, and every year that hope was crushed in some new and creative way. I looked down at the message again, and something inside me shifted. I was not angry. I was not hurt. I was just done. Done with waiting for permission to matter. Done with shrinking myself to fit into their narrow definition of acceptable. Done with playing the role of the grateful outsider who should be thankful for whatever scraps of affection they tossed my way. I opened my phone and pulled up the building management app. My penthouse came with access to the rooftop terrace, a massive 1,500 square foot space with stunning views of the city. The building rules allowed private events with advance notice and proper permits, but there was a 50-person limit that the HOA loved to enforce with an iron fist. I had helped draft those rules 2 years ago when I joined the board briefly before resigning in frustration over their petty power games. I knew every loophole, every exemption, every piece of fine print that they had included to protect themselves, and that I could now use against them. I booked the rooftop for Thanksgiving Day. Then I reserved 4 industrial portable kitchens, a heating system, professional lighting, and enough tables and chairs to seat 120 people. I sent a message to Maddie, my assistant, who had been with me since the early days of Skyline and who understood me better than most of my family ever had. The message was simple: find 120 people who need a warm meal on Thursday. Priority to Skyline drivers night shift, nurses, security guards, anyone working the holiday. Make it happen. Her response came back in under a minute. On it. This is going to be amazing. Within an hour, I received the first email from the HOA. It was from Mrs. Beatrice Albright, the board president, a woman in her late 60s who treated the building like her personal kingdom and the residents like subjects who needed constant supervision. The email was polite but firm, reminding me that rooftop events were limited to 49 guests and required 14 days advance notice for gatherings of any significant size. She CC'd the entire board and the building's lawyer, a man named Silas Thorne, no relation, who had a reputation for being as cold and legalistic as they came. I smiled as I read it. I had been expecting this. I opened the building bylaws, all 200 pages of them, and found exactly what I was looking for. Section 9.3, subsection B. Charitable events organized by residents in good standing are exempt from standard gathering limits provided that all safety insurance and permitting requirements are met. Such events may proceed with 72 hours notice to the board. I spent the rest of Tuesday night assembling my documentation. I hired a lawyer to draft a liability waiver. I purchased a $10 million event insurance policy. I obtained a temporary food service permit from the city. I had the building's structural engineer provide a report confirming that the rooftop could handle the weight of 150 people plus equipment. I created a detailed evacuation plan, a fire safety protocol, and a security arrangement with off-duty police officers. Every piece of paper was stamped, signed, notarized, and formatted into a 29-page packet that I emailed to the entire HOA board and Mr. Silas Thorne at 3 a.m. The subject line read, Thanksgiving Charitable Dinner. Full compliance documentation attached, event proceeding per bylaw exemption 9.3b. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen island drinking coffee and watching the sky slowly lighten over the city, and I felt more alive than I had in years. Wednesday morning, my phone started ringing before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. It was Mrs. Albright, and I let it go to voicemail. Then Silas Thorne called, and I let that one go too. I was not interested in a conversation where they tried to guilt me or intimidate me into backing down. I had spent my entire life backing down, and I was finished. The emails started coming in fast. Mrs. Albright sent a formal objection citing noise concerns and the disruption to other residents. I replied with a copy of my permit allowing amplified sound for charitable events valid from 10 in the morning until 9 at night, with all music directed inward and kept below 80 decibels. Silas Thorne sent a terse message reminding me that the board had the right to deny any event that posed a risk to the building or its residents. I replied with my structural engineer's report, my insurance policy, and a polite note pointing out that denying a legally compliant charitable event could open the board up to a discrimination lawsuit. Then, in the middle of the flurry of hostile emails, I received a message from an unexpected source. It was from Chef Antoine Dubois, a retired chef who lived 2 floors below me. I had met him exactly once in the elevator, and he had commented on the smell of roasted chicken coming from my unit the previous week, saying it was bold but needed more time. The email was blunt and to the point. I hear you are making trouble with the HOA. I also hear you are feeding 150 people tomorrow. If you need someone who knows how to properly roast a turkey and will not poison your guests, I am available. I have been retired for 3 years, and I am losing my mind with boredom. I almost laughed out loud. I wrote back immediately. You are hired. Rooftop kitchen 6 a.m. Thursday. Bring your knives. His response was a single word. Excellent. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop. My mother called, and I sent it to voicemail. Serafina called, and I did the same. Then Leo called, and I almost answered, but I stopped myself. I knew what he would say. He would apologize, tell me he felt terrible, explain that Serafina had invited her entire legal team to Thanksgiving dinner and that the table was truly full, and could I please just let it go and maybe come for dessert? It was the same script every year, and I was tired of pretending it was okay. Instead, I read the text message he sent after I did not pick up. Hey sis, I know you are upset. Serafina invited like 10 people from her firm, and Mom says the dining room is maxed out. I am really sorry. Maybe we can do something just us next weekend. I stared at the message for a long time, and then I looked around my penthouse. I had a dining table that could seat 12, and it was always empty. I had a kitchen that was never used for anything other than reheating takeout. I had a home that felt more like a hotel, beautiful and sterile and lonely. If their table was full, I would build my own. I texted Maddie. Change of plans. We are going to 150 people. I need the freight elevator reserved for 24 hours starting now. Let's make this bigger. Then I posted a single message on the Skyline Logistics internal message board. Thanksgiving dinner on my rooftop tomorrow. Open to all drivers, warehouse staff, dispatchers, and their families. If you are working the holiday or have nowhere to go, you have a seat. No RSVP needed. Just show up. The responses started flooding in immediately. Thank you so much. I was dreading spending tomorrow alone. My kids are going to be so excited. This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in years. I read every single message and I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been wound tight for as long as I could remember. Wednesday night, I got a call from my grandmother, Martha Parker. She was my mother's mother, a woman in her late 70s who had built a career as one of the most feared and respected lawyers in Chicago before retiring 5 years ago. She and my grandfather Arthur had always been the ones who believed in me, who showed up when no one else did, who sent cards and made phone calls and remembered my birthday. But over the last few years, my parents had distanced themselves from my grandparents, claiming they were too busy or that the drive was too long, and I suspected the real reason was that my grandparents refused to play along with their narrative that I was the problem child who needed to be managed and minimized. Martha did not call often, but when she did, it was always direct and to the point. Aurora, she said, using my old name because she had never fully accepted the change, even though she respected my decision. I just got off the phone with your mother. She told me that tomorrow's dinner is full and that you were not invited. Is that correct? Yes, I said quietly. That is correct. And I was not invited either, she said, and there was a dangerous calm in her voice. Your mother told me they simply did not have room this year. Apparently, Serafina's colleagues take priority over her own mother. I did not know what to say. I had not realized that they had excluded her too. Martha continued, her voice sharp as a blade. I have spent 50 years watching your parents play favorites, and I have bitten my tongue because I believed they would eventually grow out of it. But this is unacceptable. I am calling to tell you that whatever you are planning for tomorrow, I want in. Your grandfather and I are coming. I felt a lump in my throat. You do not have to do that. I am fine. Do not insult me by pretending you are fine, she said firmly. You are hosting a dinner for 150 people out of spite and heartbreak, and I applaud you for it. Text me the details. We will be there. She hung up before I could argue. I sat there in the dark, staring at my phone, and for the first time in days, I felt tears prick at my eyes. But they were not sad tears. They were something else, something closer to relief. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of Chicago autumn day where the sky is impossibly blue and the wind cuts right through you. I woke up at 4:30, showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and headed up to the rooftop. The freight elevator was already running, hauling up tables, chairs, heaters, and equipment. Maddie was there coordinating everything with the efficiency of a military general. Chef Antoine had arrived even earlier, and he was already in one of the portable kitchens barking orders at 2 assistants he had somehow recruited. By 6 a.m., the rooftop was transformed. Long tables stretched across the space covered in white linens. Strings of warm lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a soft glow even in the early morning. Portable heaters hummed quietly, taking the edge off the cold. The kitchens were roaring to life, and the smell of roasting turkey baking bread and simmering vegetables filled the air. I stood in the middle of it all, watching the city wake up around us, and I felt a fierce sense of pride. This was mine. I had built this. Not for approval, not for validation, but because it was the right thing to do. At 7 a.m., exactly, the elevator doors opened, and out stepped Mrs. Beatrice Albright Silas Thorne, a city building inspector and a fire marshal. They all looked grim and determined, and Mrs. Albright's expression was one of barely concealed contempt. Good morning, I said calmly, walking over to meet them. Thank you for coming. As you can see, we are fully set up and ready for inspection. Mrs. Albright did not waste time on pleasantries. Miss Thorne, this is highly irregular. We have received multiple complaints about noise disruption and safety concerns. We are here to ensure that you are in full compliance, and I will be frank with you. I expect we will find grounds to shut this down immediately. I nodded. I understand. Please proceed. The fire marshal walked over to the portable kitchens, his eyes scanning every detail. He stopped in front of Chef Antoine, who was calmly basting a turkey, and said, "Where are your fire extinguishers?" Chef Antoine did not even look up. Class K extinguishers are mounted on the side of each kitchen unit, fully inspected and certified. ABC extinguishers are positioned every 20 feet around the perimeter. Clearance from all heating elements exceeds code by 18 inches. You will find everything in order. The fire marshal checked every extinguisher, measured the clearances, and examined the gas lines. After 10 minutes, he turned to Mrs. Albright and said, "Fire safety is compliant." Mrs. Albright's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The building inspector moved to the center of the rooftop and pulled out a tablet. "What is the maximum load capacity of this rooftop, and what is your current estimated weight?" I handed him my own tablet already open to the structural engineer's report. The rooftop is rated for 12,000 pounds per square foot. Our current estimated load, including all guests' equipment and furniture, is approximately 3,000 pounds per square foot, or 25% of capacity. Full documentation is in your email. He scrolled through the report, checking the calculations and the engineer's certification. After a few minutes, he nodded. "Structural safety is compliant." "Two down." Mrs. Albright's face was turning red. Silas Thorne stepped forward, his expression cold and professional. "Miss Thorne, we have received 3 formal noise complaints from residents on the floors below. Building Bylaws, Section 12, Subsection 1. Guarantee residents the right to quiet enjoyment of their property. This event clearly violates that right." I had been waiting for this one. I pulled out a folder and handed him a copy of my special event permit issued by the city. This permit authorizes amplified sound for charitable events from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. with sound levels not to exceed 80 decibels as measured from the nearest residential unit. All music will be acoustic and directed inward away from the building edges. I have hired a professional sound engineer to monitor levels throughout the day. Additionally, I have sent personal letters to every resident in this building informing them of the event, apologizing for any inconvenience, and offering them an open invitation to join us. Silas Thorne took the permit, read it carefully, and then looked up at me with something that might have been grudging respect. "This is compliant," he said quietly. Mrs. Albright lost her composure. "I do not care if it is compliant," she snapped. "This is not a soup kitchen. This building has standards, and we have a right to maintain the quality and peace of our community. You cannot just turn our rooftop into a charity event without consequences." I looked her directly in the eye. "Mrs. Albright, with all due respect, I can. Section 9.3, subsection B of the building bylaws, which you yourself voted to approve 2 years ago, explicitly allows for charitable events that meet safety and permitting standards. The right to quiet enjoyment as defined in Section 12, subsection 1, cannot be invoked to block a legally compliant charitable event. I have documentation from the Night Shift Alliance, a registered nonprofit, confirming that this is an official fundraising and community service event. Your position has no legal standing." Silas Thorne cleared his throat. "Mrs. Albright, she is correct. We do not have grounds to shut this down." Mrs. Albright looked like she was about to explode, but before she could say anything else, the elevator doors opened again, and out stepped my family. Richard and Eleanor Vance, dressed in expensive coats and looking like they had not slept. Serafina, immaculate as always in a designer dress and heels, her face a mask of fury. And Leo, trailing behind them, his expression conflicted and miserable. "Oh, good," I said quietly. "The whole family is here." My mother walked toward me, her voice shaking. "Aurora, what have you done?" I smiled, calm and steady. "I am hosting Thanksgiving dinner. You said your table was full, so I built my own." Serafina stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You have made us a laughingstock. Do you have any idea how many people have tagged us in posts about this? This is not charity, Aurora. This is revenge." I shook my head. "This is not about you, Serafina. This is about the fact that I have spent my entire life waiting for a seat at a table that was never going to have room for me. So I stopped waiting." Before anyone could respond, the elevator opened one more time and out stepped my grandmother, Martha, followed by my grandfather, Arthur. Martha was dressed in a deep red coat, her silver hair swept up elegantly, and she walked with the kind of confidence that could silence a courtroom. Arthur, a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, walked beside her, his hand on her arm. Martha surveyed the scene, her gaze sweeping over the HOA board, my family, and finally landing on me. She smiled a fierce and proud smile, and then she turned to Mrs. Albright. "Good morning," Beatrice Martha said coolly. "I see you are trying to shut down my granddaughter's charitable event. How disappointing." Mrs. Albright looked like she had been slapped. "Mrs. Parker, this is a board matter. It does not concern you." Martha reached into her coat pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. She handed the first to Silas Thorne. "This is a letter from my attorney confirming that as of yesterday afternoon, I am now a 6.2% shareholder in the real estate investment trust that owns this building. That makes me a voting stakeholder in all building matters. The second envelope is for you, Beatrice. It contains a formal notice that I am filing a complaint with the board regarding discriminatory enforcement of building rules." Silas Thorne opened the letter, read it quickly, and his face went pale. "This is legitimate," he said quietly. Martha turned to my parents and her voice was ice. "Richard, Eleanor, I am here because I was also not invited to your Thanksgiving dinner. Apparently your table is full for me as well. It seems that you have decided that family is only valuable when it is convenient." My mother opened her mouth to respond, but Martha held up a hand. "I am not finished," Martha said sharply. "As of last night, I have revised my will. All distributions from the Parker Foundation, which controls a significant portion of your expected inheritance, will now be allocated based on a single criterion. Those who expand their tables will have a seat. Those who use their seats as weapons will lose them." There was a stunned silence. Seraphina's face went white. Richard looked like he might be sick. "You cannot do that," Seraphina said, her voice shaking. "That is coercion, that is manipulation." Martha smiled. "That is consequence. You have spent years treating your sister like an inconvenience. You have excluded her, dismissed her, and made her feel like she was never enough. And you did the same to me. I am simply making it clear that those actions have a cost." Leo, who had been silent the entire time, stepped forward. He looked at Seraphina, then at our parents, and then at me. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I should have said something sooner. I should have stood up for you. I was wrong." He walked over to me and stood beside me, and I felt something inside me crack open, something warm and painful and healing all at once. Maddie, who had been watching from the side, quietly held up her phone. She had been recording the entire confrontation, and she was live streaming it to a private group she had created called The Real Thanksgiving. Within minutes, the video was being shared and notifications started pouring in. Mrs. Albright saw the phone and her face went purple. "You are recording this. This is a private matter." "This is a public event," Maddie said calmly, "and the public deserves to know how the HOA treats charitable work." Silas Thorne held up the hand. "Mrs. Albright, I strongly advise you to step back. This has gone from a bylaw dispute to a potential discrimination case. If we continue to obstruct this event, we could be facing serious legal consequences. I recommend we withdraw." Mrs. Albright looked around, saw that she had lost, and turned on her heel. She stalked back to the elevator without another word, and Silas Thorne followed her, looking relieved to escape. The building inspector and fire marshal shook my hand. "You did good work here," the fire marshal said. "Everything is up to code. Have a great Thanksgiving." They left, and it was just me, my family, my grandparents, Maddie and Chef Antoine standing on the rooftop as the sun climbed higher in the sky. My mother looked at me, and there were tears in her eyes. Aurora, I did not realize. I did not think. "I know," I said quietly. "You never did." Richard stepped forward, his voice stiff and formal. "What do you want from us?" I looked at him, this man who had spent my entire childhood making me feel like I was not enough, and I realized that I did not want anything from him anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted my own life. I wanted to build something that mattered. "I want you to go home," I said. "I want you to have your dinner with Seraphina's colleagues and your perfectly set table. And I want you to think about what it cost you to keep that table so small." Eleanor reached out a hand. "Please, Aurora, can we talk about this?" I shook my head. "Not today. Today, I have 150 people coming who actually want to be here. Maybe next year if you can make room." I turned away from them and walked back to the center of the rooftop. Behind me, I heard the elevator doors close as my parents and Serafina left. Leo stayed. Martha walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I am proud of you." I looked at her, this fierce woman who had never stopped believing in me, and I smiled. "Thank you for coming." She squeezed my shoulder. I would not have missed it for the world. By 10 a.m., the rooftop was full. Skyline drivers and their families, night shift nurses still in scrubs, security guards from downtown office buildings, a retired veteran named Walter who lived on the 4th floor and who I had never spoken to before, a young woman named Amelia who worked as an EMT and who had been planning to spend the day alone in her apartment. Chef Antoine carved turkey after turkey, his face flushed with pride and exertion. Maddie directed the flow of guests, making sure everyone had a seat, a plate, and someone to talk to. Leo helped carry trays of food, and he kept looking over at me with an expression that was equal parts guilt and admiration. At noon, a news crew showed up. Someone had tipped them off, and they wanted to do a story about the woman who had defied her HOA and her family to host a Thanksgiving feast for the forgotten workers of Chicago. I agreed to a short interview, and I kept it simple. I said that everyone deserves a seat at the table and that sometimes you have to build your own table if no one else will make room for you. The story aired that night on the 10 o'clock news, and by Friday morning it had gone viral. The hashtag #SeatForEveryone was trending on social media. I received hundreds of messages from people telling me their own stories of being excluded, dismissed, and forgotten. Some of them were heartbreaking. Some of them were infuriating. All of them mattered. On Friday afternoon, Martha called me again. She sounded pleased. "Your grandfather and I have made a decision. We are establishing an endowment to fund an annual Thanksgiving event on your rooftop. 10 years of funding full professional staff open to anyone in the city who needs a meal. We are calling it the Long Table." I sat down on my couch, overwhelmed. "Grandma, you do not have to do that." "Yes, we do," she said firmly. "You showed us what is possible when you stop asking for permission and start building something better. We want to support that." That night, I stood on my rooftop alone, looking out over the city. The lights were off, the tables were cleared, and the space was quiet again. But it did not feel empty anymore. It felt full of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Thank you for letting me stay yesterday. I am sorry it took me so long to see what was happening. I want to do better." I wrote back. "You can start by showing up next year." He replied immediately. "I will, I promise." I thought about my parents and Serafina sitting in their pristine dining room, and I wondered if they understood yet what they had lost. I wondered if they would ever be willing to make room at their table, or if they would keep building walls until there was no one left to shut out. But that was their choice to make. I had made mine. I had learned that you cannot force people to value you. You cannot shrink yourself small enough to fit into a space that was never meant to hold you. And you cannot wait forever for an invitation that will never come. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop waiting. Stop asking. Stop hoping that this time will be different. Sometimes you just have to build your own table, pull up your own chairs, and invite the people who actually see you. And sometimes when you do that, you realize that your table was never too small. It was just meant for different people. I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down at my kitchen island. On the counter was a single place card that Chef Antoine had made for me, hand-lettered in elegant script. It read, "For the woman who made room." I smiled, set it aside, and opened my laptop. I had work to do. Skyline Logistics was not going to run itself, and I had 150 people counting on me to keep building something that mattered. But this time, I was not building it to prove anything to my family. I was building it because it was mine, because I believed in it, and because I had finally learned that the only approval I needed was my own. The next morning, I received an email from my mother. It was long and rambling, full of apologies and explanations and requests to talk. I read it once, then archived it without responding. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew that no conversation we could have right now would change anything. They needed time to sit with what had happened, and I needed space to keep building my own life. Serafina did not reach out at all, which did not surprise me. She had spent her entire life being the favorite, and she was not going to give that up easily. But Leo kept texting. Small things mostly, a funny meme, a question about work, an article he thought I would like. He was trying, and I appreciated that even if I was not ready to fully trust it yet. Martha and Arthur invited me to brunch the following Sunday, and I went. We sat in their favorite restaurant, a quiet place with white tablecloths and excellent coffee, and we talked about everything except Thanksgiving. It was nice. It was normal. It was what family was supposed to feel like. As I was leaving, Arthur pulled me aside. "You know," he said gently, "your grandmother has always been a fighter, but I think you might be even fiercer than she is. I am proud of the woman you have become." I hugged him tightly and I let myself feel it. The pride, the love, the sense that I was finally truly seen. In the weeks that followed, the story continued to spread. I was invited to speak at a local nonprofit gala. A journalist wanted to write a feature for a magazine. A publisher reached out about a book. I declined most of it because I did not want to become a symbol or a brand. I just wanted to keep doing the work. But I did agree to one interview for a podcast about family dynamics and setting boundaries. I talked about what it felt like to spend your whole life trying to earn a love that was always conditional. I talked about the moment I realized I had to stop waiting for permission to matter. And I talked about what it meant to build your own table. The episode came out in early December, and I received a flood of messages from people who said they had needed to hear it. People who were planning their own Thanksgiving dinners for next year. People who were cutting ties with toxic family members. People who were learning, just like I had, that sometimes love means walking away. And through it all, I kept working. Skyline Logistics grew. I hired more drivers, expanded our routes, and started a program to provide benefits and support for workers who were often invisible. I made sure that everyone who worked for me knew they mattered, that they had value, and that they had a seat at the table. Because that was the lesson in the end. Not that I was brave or strong or special, but that everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to matter, and if the people who are supposed to love you cannot make room for you, then you have to make room for yourself. You have to stop waiting for the invitation and start setting your own table. You have to stop asking for permission and start building the life you deserve. And you have to remember that the size of your table is not measured by how many people you can exclude, but by how many people you can welcome in. That is what I learned on that cold Thanksgiving morning, standing on a rooftop in Chicago, surrounded by people I barely knew, but who showed up anyway. I learned that family is not always the people you are born to. Sometimes it is the people you choose. Sometimes it is the people who choose you back. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be invisible. Refuse to be small. Refuse to keep waiting for a seat at a table that was never meant for you. Because the truth is, you do not need their table. You never did. You just need the courage to build your own. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been made to feel like you did not deserve a seat at the table? Have you ever been excluded, dismissed, or made invisible by the people who were supposed to love you? And if so, what did you do about it? Did you keep waiting, or did you build your own table? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and your story matters. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss future stories. And remember, you are never too much, too little, or too anything. You are exactly enough, exactly as you are. You just need to find your people, and sometimes that means building your own table and sending out your own invitations. Stop waiting for permission. Start building your feast.